Welcome to Roots and Ruminants, your podcast for creative and innovative use of farm, pasture, and rangeland. We're going back to the basics of raising and grazing livestock, growing your own forage, and practical land use.
Hey, welcome back, everybody.
There we go.
We are on episode number 464 of Roots and Ruminants, starting back with our initial guest of Roots and Ruminants. James Holz is in the house from Greene County, Iowa. And so Jared and I visited earlier this week, and there's been some shakeups with policy, right? The big, beautiful bill was signed on July 4th by Trump. And so there's some things that are going to shake loose in this. And Jared said, I had a great conversation with James Holtz about this. Let's get him back on the podcast and dissect this sucker. So that's what we're going to do today. James,
Perfect.
welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you. Much like BBB, what is it, House File 1? I was on episode 1 originally.
Episode
House
1.
File 1.
HR 1, I think is what
Years ago. I don't know how many years ago that was, but
Yeah. Back
at
then,
least
all he was
3.
talking about grazing cornfields and relating it to edible underwear.
Yep.
And now you've matured into being able to talk about the big, beautiful bill. So you've really come a long ways since this podcast
really
started.
I'm not any more mature than I was back then.
Well, it's kind of, you started your career after college, James, with Dreyfus, right?
Yep. Yeah, I
You're
started
allowed
Louis
to talk about
Dreyfus.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, but-
I started Louis Dreyfus after college and traded corn and distillers, both domestically and internationally. And then I retired, and then I went home and farmed, and maybe found that a little boring because I was used to transactions at the time, addicted to transactions. Some people are addicted to Zen,
Yeah.
but I was addicted to transactions.
Zins with an S.
Yeah, Zens with an S. I was addicted to transactions. So then Justin convinced me to be a Millborn dealer at the time when that was your retail brand. And I started Iowa Cover Crop with a business partner of mine. So we're located in Jefferson, Iowa, and we all sell cover crop seeds. So this big, beautiful bill is kind of intersects both of my worlds, or a former world of mine and then my current role today.
Yeah. So this is reminiscent of a conversation I had this weekend here too, with just some local neighbor farmers and stuff. And, the comment was made by one of them is like, well, I suppose with all these like green initiatives and all this stuff going away, I suppose it's really going to hurt like, cover crop business and that kind of stuff, because depending on what types of influencers you want to listen to, right? Like, it's like back to the Epstein list, which I'm glad we're talking about Epstein so we can be flagged as being talked about Epstein in this list. Some people are like, oh, there's influencers. I got a binder. I went to a press release at the White House and I have a binder with the Epstein files in here. It's all released. And then other people are saying, obviously not. This is a complete gaslighting. It's not going away. So if you want to believe some of the messaging, which is that all the funding around sustainability, all the funding around, this Green New Deal stuff, all of it is gone. However, most of the stuff that actually is affecting agriculture that was canceled in the IRA was actually renewed, extended, improved, and increased in funding in the OBBB.
Yeah.
You say that through... Go ahead, James.
What I find interesting is the actual less media you consume, the more news you get.
Just refining the individuals that you're having conversations with into like more particular points, or relying on subject matter experts, or...
I just think that we just get overwhelmed with news, real, fake, biased, one way or the other, that it's really hard to, find the tree in the forest per se, or whatever that, find your way. It's just really hard to figure out what's going on and what isn't going on. What do you think, Justin?
I have the opposite opinion because I stay on of the news like all the time actually, and
That's why you're probably the most informed.
I don't know if that's true. I'm only well here. Maybe you can get informed the most correctly if you stay on of it because you go looking for the answers when you
Yeah.
want to hear them versus being influenced by the noise.
Yeah, rather than having someone tell you what you should be paying attention to, you organically seek out answers to direct questions as they intersect, right?
There you go.
So let's say all you needed to know from this whole noise conversation is like, all right, what was in the big beautiful bill that's
Yep.
going to affect agriculture, right?
Yep.
And you just ask that question instead of listening to all kinds of other noise out there on what is and is not in there.
Jared, that was
Yeah.
exactly what I wrote in Google the other day.
Really?
And
Just
AI
that
formatted
question.
a nice page on everything. Yep.
Yeah.
Maybe Jared is AI and we just didn't realize it this whole time, Justin.
I've been AI.
He's like the
for
OG
years.
Grok.
I can AI hundreds of heifers in one day. I've been AIing a lot. Interestingly, like actual AI, like artificial insemination, was maybe one of the few activities that's the least affected by artificial intelligence because it's such a like ill-defined procedure. Like they've been trying to figure out like a mechanical replacement, like a robotic
Hmm.
arm that would palpate a cow and like manipulate a gun through the cervix. And they have it for
Really?
sows, right? Yeah, because it's like more of an external thing. But like they
Uh-huh.
can't do it because it's such a different thing. Like robots are made to do a very precise thing over and over again in an extremely controlled environment. The less controlled the environment is, and the more it relies on sensory to adjust itself, the harder it is to do.
Yeah.
So
So if you
AI,
want job
artificial
relevance,
insemination,
yeah,
very relevant.
yeah,
A lot of fecal matter in your upper torso and face area from time to time, but safe job.
That's
The
why
trades. One of the trades.
That's why Jared has a beard. So he can keep
Yeah,
some of it.
right. Then you just brush
that
it
is
off.
like the most real jobs are the ones that are least affected by it.
Mm-hmm.
Like manual labor and like
Yeah.
things that
Podcasters.
exactly. There ain't nobody replicating this on AI. Just kidding.
Probably is. They could probably just
That
listen
totally
to
is.
like the 87 episodes that we've done already, and then just completely do an
Yeah.
episode
They
for
could
us
make up
without
a
us being on
guest
here.
and
Yeah, we
I
could just
bet
use
you
our
could.
pictures and make our mouths move, and this is probably what they'd say based on.
It would probably be more interesting.
It might be more accurate. But yeah, no, it's the whole like learn to code thing. Like, oh, you're not gonna be a truck driver anymore. Learn to code, or weld or whatever. Now it's like, yeah, coding is one of
Miss.
the things that was the easiest to replace by AI because it's like
Yeah.
a computer talking to a computer. Computers are really good at talking to computers, better than people. So now we don't need to code anymore. Whatever coding was, I never coded. Learned to code. I never got into it.
I've been
Glad
code
I
free since 2003.
dodged that bullet. So
I was just learning how to sweep bottoms of bins, so that hasn't been replaced by
it's not
AI
been
either.
replaced.
No,
It's been replaced by bin sweeps.
true, but
Backs.
it's
Still
just
gotta
not the same.
Still gotta get the broom for the last little bit.
Yeah.
Let's just want a back slot. Okay, so in the big beautiful bill, there was a very particular language, and so anybody that's been in South Dakota, Iowa, Minnesota, North Dakota, even Illinois, has had the conversation in the news dominated by talk about carbon pipelines for years. Very heated discussion object, and that was due to something in the tax code called 45Q tax credits, which were for biofuel companies to be able to do direct capture of carbon and then put it into geological formations to monitor it and cap it for 99 years.
Yeah, we've been talking about this since I think Summit's carbon pipeline was probably 2022 or 21 is when they formally announced it, and so it's been going for a long time. And Jared and I always used to talk about we could do 45Q if we could figure out how to get the valves on the plants to measure how much carbon they did. Like once we figured that out, then it was basically the same thing. That was why the carbon pipeline is so successful in this. I mean, it hasn't been done yet, but in theory is because it can measure how much carbon is going into the ground.
Yeah.
Whereas plants, you can't measure it. If we had
Right.
a way to measure it, it'd be awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, it turned that substrate into a valuable product from the tax credit standpoint because it was highly measurable, the point of access where you could have a large aggregation of it and measure it. I always thought it was interesting that the potential opportunity for economic impact was far greater in my mind with 45Z tax credit potential. And that, instead of being, kind of controlled by a singular entity or a couple of entities that had these pipelines and geological sequestration, would be accessed in mass by farmers that were producing the corn, the soybeans, the sunflowers, the canola, milo, anything that goes into biofuel production. And that's been held up for years in interpretation and guidance and things like that. So it hasn't ever really been out there for dissemination until now. And then there was also this, when it was passed in the IRA package, it sunsetted in 2027. It took so long to get the guidance that it was like a real scenario where it was a real thing, but it might not be worth the time and investment for a biofuel company to even integrate, to change the way they procure their products, to invest in the data capture, invest in the premium structure to the farmers to make it worthwhile. Because you're not going to do all that for 1, maybe 2 seasons. That has now been extended through 2029, right? So it goes all the way up to 2030 now, which now gives us basically this 4.5, 5-year runway. And let's be honest, once it gets into law, into practice, once it gets renewed once like it just did, it probably becomes a permanent fixture in American agriculture policy for the foreseeable future because, government subsidies essentially live forever. So the impact of this is massive, enormous potential for a entirely new value structure that's never existed that kind of turns on with the snap of a fingers in the near future. That's how I take it. James, what's your take on it?
I take it very similar to that. Before we get into the weeds of CI scores and how you essentially, it's a tax credit, so ethanol plants can sell lower carbon fuels, which has been dominated by California, has been wanting these lower carbon fuels. And with that, it's not only a tax credit for the farmer, but also it's essentially a tax credit for the biofuel producer, who can not only buy lower carbon feedstocks, but they are also incentivized to make improvements at their plants so that they use less carbon in their systems. Mm-hmm. So that could be drying less DDGs. That could be making internal changes in their system to lower their footprints. And that can also be pumping it into a pipeline that goes into North Dakota into a formation via pipeline. And so all those things, all these little incremental changes that the ethanol plants or biofuel producers can do makes their CI score lower and can trigger a 45Z tax credit. So it's not only going to be just the feedstocks, but it's also going to be all these incremental changes on the processors too.
Right.
So what part of the bill ties directly to the 45Z?
It's just, so 45Z is just where it sits at in the U.S. Treasury tax code, right? So it's just the creation of that, an extension of that credit that exists within the tax code. So 45Q, 45Z are just different sections of the tax code that they fall under.
However, we still don't know the rules from Treasury on what the practice is and how you score 45Z tax credits. So how you actually get them yet.
And why couldn't it take off in the Biden administration, but could through this bill?
They were just honestly slow. I don't know what.
Kicking the can down the road.
Yeah, they were just slow to come out with guidance.
politically doesn't make any sense why they were slow, because if this is their agenda and the IRA is their big crowning achievement, whether it's right or wrong, why wouldn't you push something forward? Um, like you see it in policy like Obamacare, there's like been changes since Obamacare, but it was towards the end of Obama's administration, so he just pushed it out no matter what.
Yeah.
And so we were kind of surprised that there wasn't guidance from Treasury. Why didn't the Biden administration just make, Treasury make rules, essentially?
Well, and I think that politically, from a political standpoint too, it may have been a no-win situation because you had environmental groups that are not happy with corn ethanol, right? Don't think corn ethanol should be, even considered green, right? It's just we should move to electric vehicles. We shouldn't be messing with liquid fuels anyway. There's a strong case to be made that the expansion of the ethanol industry and that use of corn led to, land use change, moving from perennial native pastures into crop production in the northern Great Plains primarily. And so there was people that were like, we don't want to support, we won't see another support, right, way out here. Then there was farm groups probably saying, we want to see these have the least possible restrictions, right? So anything that you come back with that's moderately restrictive, we could be viewed as antagonistic. So the punchline win was the creation of the tax credit. But then when you get to the details, then all of a sudden you run the risk of offending multiple people. So they might have done it that way too, just to be like, leave it out there.
Yep.
Make sure to get us elected again so you can get your way, but we're not going to tell you which way we're leaning on these things.
So, yeah, part of the dissection of the big beautiful bill was like the redirection of the IRA. And does the 45Z tax credit fall within that allocation of dollars, of however many $1 billion was that?
No, 45Z didn't have any. It wasn't in as far as I don't know this for sure. 45Z wasn't in like the agricultural portions of the bills because it's really not an agricultural program.
Oh,
It's a tax program. Right,
okay.
Jed?
Yeah, that's my understanding. That's why it's huge in farm policy. It makes a huge difference, but it's not a farm bill activity.
Whereas the farm bill activities were raising prices on ARC and PLC and not really agriculture policy, but inheritance taxes on higher exemptions for, what is it, 40 million instead of 15 million or 25 million. I forget what it is.
I think it went up to 15. Yeah.
Or 15. And so like those,
individually.
yeah. And then when they allocated the IRA funds on conservation,
Yep.
they basically said, we're going to use whatever IRA did, but now we're going to call it our own.
Yeah.
Like we're going to put our own hood ornament on our Chrysler. Like,
Yeah.
it's going to be a Ford now because we put a different hood ornament on it.
So the billions of dollars of additional allocation to EQIP, CSP, RSVP, and those kind of activities within NRCS that happened in IRA essentially got canceled, which I still understand how you just like make an executive order to cancel a duly passed bill by both houses of Congress and signed by the president. But essentially that probably wouldn't have held up in court, but they did it long enough to that they could repass it and just make it their own so that nobody fights it too much. So those are now embedded into the baseline of the farm bill. So like one of the big discussions on how much funding should be in the farm bill for conservation programs through NRCS, that's already been solved. So there's several components of this that are direct farm issues that show up in farm bill conversations that are already pre-solved going into the farm bill negotiation.
Well, so what's this big beautiful bill is happening is like it's a really neat thing, especially if you're sitting in the middle of corn country. I am 20 miles from 3 different ethanol plants, 60 miles from probably a half dozen. Corn in my area goes to 2 places. It either goes to ethanol or goes to hogs, and that's it. And then we actually are net corn importers in our local region. Our local county's a net corn importer. And so what could happen is you have
in the farm, in this big beautiful bill in the agriculture part, you have all these, I'll call them subsidies, whether it's funding of equip or CSP, whatever these programs are. So you have funding on all these conservation programs. At the same time, you have potential 45Z guidance that could come out in the next month or so, where these uh, ethanol plants will be paying more for low CI score corn. So you really have a a really crazy dynamic of farmers could be getting paid a lot of money to use these conservation practices on their farm. And just to give an example, Iowa State came out with their CI score calculator from the last comments that Treasury did about the rules. That would have been probably in January. And on these, what they estimate is a farmer will get roughly $75 an acre if they use no-till cover crops and sell it to an ethanol plant. And so if you top that on top of what the equip payments are, you're talking 120 or 100 to $40 an acre payments for farmers to be using conservation practices. So that's a lot of money. That's 20% of gross revenue on some farms today.
Well, here it'd be like 30-40% of gross revenue just between basis and yield. Like, I mean, it's very significant. So let me just kind of explain what this really means, because there's a few misnomers out there. One is that farmers are eligible for tax credits for their own taxes. That is untrue. The only people that can create these biofuel tax credits are biofuel companies that create the clean fuel. So it's dependent on the biofuel companies willing to address it and create a mechanism by which they can collect the data from producers on practices being used, essentially produce a mini life cycle analysis of carbon intensity on each individual field. Based on the yield of that field gives you X amount of X bushels from that field that have a CI score, carbon intensity score of this. The lower carbon intensity score, the better it is, the more credits it generates. Also, not clear guidance on this yet, but some interpretations of the GREET-Argonne model, which will be adjusted, would show that a combination of no-till, cover crops, crop rotation could potentially reduce that by 30 to 35 points from the CI score standpoint. It's got to be below 50 to where it starts counting. So if you can do that, if you can lower, so let's say you were at 50 and you can lower it down to 20, and there's numbers that are lower than that, then you would be basically lowering the CI score in that feedstock by 30 points. That 30 points translates into 2 cents a gallon potential tax credit that can be created per gallon of ethanol. That's 60 cents per gallon on ethanol. Average ethanol yield is somewhere around 2.7, which means that total tax credit potential available could be as high as a really big number, like $1.50 total a bushel. Now, a lot of mouths got to eat out of that, right? Someone has to verify. The ethanol company has a tremendous amount of increased infrastructure costs from legal and accounting. If they engage in this, they'll quickly exceed their total taxable income for the year, where it will be completely wiped out by tax credits, which means that they would have to transfer those tax credits or sell them on the open market. They're most likely going to get discounted to some degree, maybe 2%, maybe 5%, maybe 10%, depending on the transaction and the appetite for this amount of tax credits. All those things go into play. The other thing is that they're generally limited to 20 cents a gallon on 45Z subsidies and 35 cents if it's aviation fuel, unless they have additional criteria from employment and apprenticeship. And this is based on expanding the job market, expanding jobs within their system and stuff. They would have to meet other criteria to go beyond that 20 cents per gallon. So there's a whole lot of guesses in there on that $75. Does that assume that half of it goes back to the farmer? Does it assume that 2/3 of it does?
Yeah, Iowa State was figuring half of it goes back to the farmer.
Yeah.
And they're making big assumptions.
Yes.
The largest, I think where there's a huge opportunity for farmers is if I put my ethanol plant hat on and I'm a corn procurer, you don't have to buy all lower CI score corn, but you have to buy enough that it makes it worth your while to run all the accounting and all the systems and all the
Mm-hmm.
systems you put in place. So what is going to happen is, even though they're using mass balance for their system to calculate their CI scores, they're going to want to know that so much of their corn from their supply chain is going to be lower CI corn and in their data system, and so much that isn't in their data system. So it's going to be a huge opportunity really to leverage your ethanol plant and say, hey, I have 100,000 bushels of corn, let's just say, and I want to commit it all to you, and I'm doing these practices. They're going to be very interested in you as a producer, because you'll be giving them data. They'll know that your corn's coming in. You might not have a price commitment, but I can definitely see a world where ethanol plants now contract acres with no price, no bushels. They just want to know that you're doing the practices that they want to do. And so if you're selling to a cooperative today, or like a mass aggregator of grain, whatever it is, that it's going to be more difficult for a co-op to offer that to an end user. And so a farmer has a huge opportunity to really get a relationship with their biofuel producer, and really leverage that relationship, because this is the one time that, other than in specialty crops, where price might not be the most important thing in the equation for selling your corn. I mean, price is also very important, but that might not be the first question that they ask you. Or they're going to want how much volume you have, and then what practices and what your CI score is, and then they'll determine what your price is. So it has a potential of making a very tiered corn market where you have dirty corn and clean corn might be worth X amount more than dirty corn. I think if it gets to that if the incentives are as big as we think they could be, that every farmer will have to chase clean corn prices or lower CI corn prices, and then the premiums will slowly disappear because the market will be flooded with lower CI corn. But in the meantime, an early adopter, or even after an early adopter, middle adopter, is really going to clean up in comparison to their neighbors.
Who's going to monitor that?
Well, so it's done on the guidance will come out, but it's going to be done on the GREET model, which is run by the Argonne Lab. It's a publicly available model, which means that no one person or one company has exclusive rights to use the track into that model. That means that there's going to be a number of different go-to-market strategies in which companies take, and farmers can take to do that. There'll be an approach where you can go out and certify your own acres through one of those modeling services and software services, and then present that to the biofuel company and say, hey, I did all this work for you. I paid to have the model applied. My data is all captured. Here's a certificate or whatever it may be.
You don't think that's another arm in the USDA?
I can see it very similar to like organic. There's certifiers, like you can certify organic with every state organization, not pay any fees. It's way more work. Or you can use a third party that helps you through the system.
Yeah,
sure.
Well, I think it'd be rolled out similar to how they've done other programs in the past, like crop insurance, where yes, is the government very involved in it and subsidize it? Yes. But it actually involves independent company underwriters and independent company providers to work within that rule system to be able to provide that service. So
And
I'm guessing that's what it'll be.
then probably every single ethanol plant or biofuel producer is going to have their own preferred third party that's verifying it, because they have to. I mean, you tell me if I'm right. I'm not 100% sure, but the validity, if the ethanol plant sells the tax credit
Yep.
and it's not correct, let's just say it doesn't have any cover crops, has no, they didn't pump any carbon through the pipeline, whatever that is case is. I mean, that's essentially tax fraud, that they're selling a tax credit that
Something
was
didn't make sense.
fraudulently made.
Yeah.
So
Nobody wants that.
nobody wants that. Yeah. So they're going to have third party verification to cover their
They're bugged.
behind.
And so
on that.
that would be my guess, is what will happen is that all the major multi-location biofuel companies are going to make their own efforts to say, this is the platform that we use, so we'll accept your CI scores, but it makes the most sense if you actually just work with us. Otherwise, there'll be there's already several companies out there. There'll be a rash of new ones, right? Because anybody that can make a software platform package with verification will be in the marketplace saying, Mr. Farmer, give us $5 an acre, or give us 10 cents a bushel, or give us some kind of monetary amount, and we'll do this for you. And if I'm a biofuel company, the last thing I want is information coming from 17 different platforms that record the information in different places, that don't come in consistency, that require manual re-entry, any of those things that are just going to make it more complicated. So Poet has this system. Green Plains, not Green Plains, ADM would have theirs. And that's how I see it most likely working, because the biofuel companies are ultimately the ones that are be on the hook. So now, like the potential tax credit size. So there's 15 billion gallons of biofuel production from ethanol, and about 2 billion gallons of biodiesel, some of that used cooking oil, some of that tallow, most of it coming from plant-based oils. So we're looking at $17 billion with a potential cap at $1 a gallon of tax credits that are transferable, making them a hard tradable asset. That is, at full 100% implementation, which will never happen, that's $17 billion, right? Let's say that this becomes significant enough annually. Let's say this becomes significant enough that 2/3 of corn procured gets here in 3 to 4 years. That is a $10 billion annual industry. And to put that in perspective on what does a $10 billion industry look like? The entire U.S. corn seed sales to all farmers in all states across the country, all companies, is probably about a $9 billion business. Okay? And think about the jobs, the public presence, the pickups going down the road, the radio advertisements. Think about the amount of impact in rural America, plus corporate headquarters in Indianapolis, St. Louis, and all over the place in big cities, is driven around that industry, which is likely going to be smaller than this could potentially be with full implementation, or even majority implementation.
We're going to have to get our order in on white pickup trucks, because they're going to be hard to find.
Busy. They're going to be busy. And keep in mind, everything we're talking about now is just 45Z. It's not a 45Q conversation. That's a whole separate deal that involves a pipeline or a geological structure. Don't even have to get into that. I've always thought that the 45Q, the pipeline discussion, was really masking, again, that bigger opportunity that was out there for farmers. But it wasn't as easy to aggregate into a singular source, so it didn't get the same highline potential as a Summit Carbon pipeline and Navigator pipeline and things like that. I'll go back to that model a little bit. You talk about what do you have to do to move the needle? Cover crops really are the central pivot for both of these, for all of these crops, for a couple of reasons. One, they move the needle in the green argon model the most, right? So I think of the 35 or 37 total points that I've seen of reduction, 19 of those come from cover crops. So the other practices, which is manure, organic fertilizer versus inorganic fertilizer, it's crop rotation, nitrogen stabilizers, or urea stabilizers, inhibitors,
Split application of
split
nitrogen.
application of nitrogen, no-till, strip-till, all of those other 5 or 6 things that are in there make up cumulatively less impact than just cover crop does. It becomes the anchor, driver for the model. The other thing is, and this could change, but the EPA guidance that came out in January is that they were only going to accept piecemeal practices in here. The only thing they were going to accept was a minimum of nitrogen application, cover crops, and reduced till no-till for corn, and reduced till no-till cover crops for soybeans, meaning that it wasn't even an optionality. You couldn't even get the much smaller credit for just being no-till if you're in a more arid environment and didn't want to include cover crops. Cover crops became the anchor of the whole thing.
But really, to get the tax credit, you are going to need to be near your supply has to be a biofuel producer. So those places that are dry, there is an ethanol plant in Dodge City, Kansas, and there's one in Pratt, and then there's one in Tharlson, North Dakota, but there's one in Redfield, South Dakota. But for the most part, the biofuel producers are in places where it rains.
For the most part,
because you have to have corn.
Texas and Idaho, South Dakota, there's some places where it's not so much, but yes, for the most part.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. But I mean, there's more production in my 20-mile radius than there is in all the dry land spots. So it's
maybe on some years.
There's more ethanol production.
Oh yeah,
within
sure,
20 miles of here than in all the dry areas.
Yeah, then there is mostly west of the 100 meridian. I'd agree.
Yeah.
So the tricky thing with all this is that there is some fringe talk about. I don't know that I've ever seen anything to justify it, that they will take a book value type approach and make these tradable credits to some degree, where you could certify acres that go into grain corn production for a feed yard in central South Dakota, do the practices, but trade your book value to somebody else's corn. I do not think that that's going to happen, but this is 100% politically driven. So again, the guidance could be overly favorable to farmers from a flexibility standpoint that maybe doesn't make perfect sense because it's a political thing. It's you know what I'm saying? Like I don't see that happening, but I can't rule it out because sentiment would say we absolutely want to see that, because the half of corn farmers that don't sell their corn into biofuels or more that sell it into either export or to high fructose corn syrup or to livestock feed primarily would say we're not eligible for this because I sell to a feed mill. And they might complain enough where they get this book value tradability thing done.
I heard a rumor yesterday, and I was talking to some ethanol people yesterday, that their lobbyists are telling them that what they're hearing is they are not going to put as much credit in farming practices and actually more credit into practices from ethanol plants improving efficiencies.
Well, so and that could be, and that language is included in this. If you're not doing anything else in the ethanol side of it from either the jobs part of it or improvements of infrastructure, you're capped at 20 cents. Whereas if you do the other hoops, you're up to $1 a bushel. But that might still be predicated on just accessing more of that farm-driven impact. Yeah, right. So it's really confusing again on how it's going to roll out, but it now is very likely that it will roll out. And it might be $25 an acre. It might be $100 an acre. It could be anywhere in between. But there's going to be something there.
What's the timeline?
I would say that, didn't the initial, that's a good question. I'm not sure if the initial guidance that's out there would allow for it to happen yet in 2025 if Treasury gets right on it. But it might be close enough that you could see some of them using this in 2025.
What I think could happen on a timeline is they'll come out with guidance towards right before 2026, and there is going to be farmers who are going to take the risk and they're going to use cover crops anyway and already do reduced tillage and no-till, that those ethanol plants are going to use those farmers that they've identified they're already doing those to test their system to see how everything works. Because if you're an ethanol plant and you go from you're dumping 100,000, if you're grinding 100,000 bushels a day, you have to bring in 150, 120,000 per dumping day. And now all of a sudden, instead of just verifying price and bushels, now you're verifying price, bushels, farming practices. That is a huge, huge process and huge undertaking to change and with a snap of the fingers. So they'll probably, if the rules go out, they'll want to find those bushels and just see how their whole process works, because they don't know how their process works, and they a lot of them don't know what third party company they're going to use, if they're even going to do it, if they're even going to try to participate in it. So there's so many questions still, out there that we really don't know right now. So my question for you guys is, so I'm in the cover crop space. I think we have Iowa, the state of Iowa and Iowa State will say that we have like 20% saturation on farmland and cover crops in the state of Iowa, which is, in my opinion, complete bullshit. I think we probably have saturation of, sub 10% still. How fast do you think a farmer, if all the rules do as we say, and let's say incentives are $75 on 45Z, and they could do a equip contract and get some other monies, what percentage of farmers in a corn belt farmers are going to adopt to cover crops, or how many will just kind of put their head in the sand and wait? What do you guys think?
Well, I think this is a whole new sector of users for cover crops. So if they weren't early adopters, it's going to take this to be pretty secure and laid out before they start. So I don't think until the early adopters are in this, and like you mentioned, the ethanol companies have test ran it, built a bit of a system, ran through it for a little bit, and then now come out and say, all right, farmer, here is what we are offering with your clean corn now. Here's what the program looks like. Then I think it's pretty fast adoption. But yeah, I'll go back to the point. If they weren't early adopters from the start, they're not going to be early adopters on this either. And it's a harder system to cover crop, especially in the northern plains. Like the corn soybean system with cover crops, especially in the Dakotas, without a small grain in that rotation, it's a challenge.
I just think there's been enough publicity about cover crops, enough soil health events, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of, third parties say, or, like government entities say, we need to give more outreach and education. It's like, well, how many field days can you have that the same 10 people go to? Like, you're not getting the masses. And so, at a certain point, like, I don't know if there's new people coming every day and trying cover crops, but if you haven't, or if you're unwilling to do it now, most likely if you're not going to want to do it tomorrow either, even with these rules.
Well, so I think a couple things, and one is that Justin talked about this is a new type of user. I think it's 100% right. I think that people who are very focused on, and I'm not saying this in a bad way, but very focused on year over year, partial budget analysis, like this year's ROI. This will be one of the first things that actually brings them to say, okay, I'm going to look at this now, because I'm renting a majority of my acres. I'm not, it's tough. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to keep this going. I'm not sure if I can rent all these acres. I have year-to-year contracts. I don't know if I can invest in 30-year soil health benefits on these one-year contracts on aggressively high rent. those folks look at this and say, okay, this is a financial decision. This might be a net return of $30 an acre, and that's better than I'm going to net return on anything this year. That's the only thing that's going to return anything if I can do this. If I can get $75 to $90 an acre on this, and I can get my costs done all in at 40, 45, this is what's going to make, like I said, the farm work for this year to keep going.
Yeah, and I don't know if I would contend to say that there's a lot of farmers that don't believe in this soil health movement and don't believe that they have a problem. That I mean, and it's not a few; it's a lot. And so maybe detaching it from soil health might actually improve soil health. And and
For sure.
erosion and all these problems that we have.
Right.
In Iowa, in the last, I'm in the Des Moines Waterworks, or I'm in the Des Moines watershed essentially. Basically, a third of the state's in the Des Moines watershed. The Raccoon River watershed goes all the way through central and west central Iowa, and I'm in it. And currently, Des Moines hasn't been able to water their lawns probably for 6 weeks now because they're running their denitrogen machines because we have too many nitrates in the water, so they can't deliver clean drinking water under 8/10 of a whatever 8/10 is their, I don't know what the measurement is, but that's their threshold. And essentially the water's running in at like 12 to 15. And so if we have cover crops in that watershed, and I'd say the saturation of that watershed for cover crops is probably, sub 10%, and that's going to have huge ramifications downstream for our urban customers and our urban neighbors, and it could be a really good benefit in throughout the state and for everybody. And it's just it might take something else other than. It will take something else other than cost shares, which is the dumbest name ever. I'm glad that this is a tax credit rather than a cost share, because cost shares, just the way they're called, make farmers not want to use them. So that's just me on my soapbox.
No, well, a cost share implies that they're covering part of the cost the farmer cards put at their cost. This is like cost plus, right? Farmers will respond to cost plus, right? Because it's like, oh, okay, so now my costs are covered and there's revenue potential. Okay, so changing it from cost share to cost plus is appropriate nomenclature, because this will more than cover costs and actual add net revenue back in.
And we've been using cost share as cost plus for 10 years now, and so like we've got it. Like it's a revenue stream for our farm, and we're improving soil health, and we're helping erosion, and we have cattle feed. Like it's just like all kinds of things you can get, but it's hard to message that to a lot of people.
Yeah. So one other thing about the impact this will have is that my guess is, let's say they're sub 10, let's just say it's 10% of cover crops planted in Iowa. So James, of those cover crops, what percent of those are flown onto or applied after corn going into a soybean crop?
I would say probably we are doing probably 50%. We're probably doing 60% corn for the soybeans the next year, but we're doing a lot of cover crops of oats going into corn the next year. And that's another question on 45Z, as is, does the cover crop have to grow? Does it have to go up? Like, what constitutes? I was at an ethanol plant meeting where we just talked about 45Z, and I said, what is minimum tillage? There's so many gray areas between tillage and cover crops. Yeah. It's wild,
Yeah. So I would say it's even the cover crops in a corn soybean system around me are even more lopsided towards 80% of the cover crops would be flown onto corn or applied after silage or drilled in after corn, wet corn potentially, though it's small small amount of that, overwintered, and then soybeans planted into, right?
Mhm.
That has been a successful value proposition for people to use without cost share, for weed control, for stand establishment, for a variety of reasons, right? You can make the one-off year over year that cereal rye going planting soybeans into works on its face example, not just for the long-term benefits or co-benefits. My understanding, which is not official guidance, is that the life cycle of that corn plant or of any of these crops absolutely ends at harvest and the new one begins, right? So it would be more about planting corn into a field that's been cover crop than it would be, hey, I did strip till, so I'm here, it's August, there looks like there's a premium, I'm going to fly a cover crop onto my corn real quick so that I can take this in for low CI corn. It's going to be that would qualify for the soybean crop the next year.
Sure.
Which there's also, I mean, this is again, this is milo, this is, canola, this is anything that makes biofuels.
So,
1.5, 1.8 billion gallons of, yeah.
Yeah, soybeans for like I have a good friend that's in the crushing business, and soybeans could be 50, 60, $70 an acre for the bio producer, which means, maybe $30 for
Yeah.
the farmer, which is actually might be better than 75 on corn, because just like you described, Jared, it's a system that has less risk.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a system that people are more comfortable with and actually has multiple other benefits, I think, than just the cost share. I'm going to continue to use that word because I know it makes you mad, James, the cost share. So then all of a sudden it's like the acres that need to happen to be eligible for the corn 45Z are actually not really the acres that are even predominantly being cover crop today, which means that it's new users and even existing users. Lots of folks that would say, I do cover crops, but I only do them after corn into soybeans, right? Not the other way around. So it is, like I said, it's a lot of new acres.
Yeah.
With new customers.
And then
and
we're going to get
the existing customers.
And then Justin and I are going to get the question, and I'll ask Justin the question. Will you guys be able to find seed for that?
We've never ran out.
We've never ran out yet, so we will figure it out.
Yep.
That's the best part of this, right?
Yeah.
Like it brings a whole new opportunity.
Yeah.
So the people that were wanting to diversify crop rotation, grow a small grain, grow a radish for a year, figure something out for the cover crop market, hey, here's more acres to supply.
Yeah.
And the farmers will always supply the seed where it's needed. They always do.
And it just takes a whole, like, I am super stoked about it. I was really excited about Big Beautiful Bill. I followed every single news article about it because the 45Z aspect of it could really change the landscape of what happens in America agriculture. And maybe this is like too bold of a prediction, but you're gonna have a lot more oats being raised down here in the Corn Belt. You're gonna have way more small grains being raised in the Northern Plains. You're gonna have a lot more experimentation with all these obscure crops that maybe we'll sell a few of them, like faba beans and lentils, and like as a cover crop, I'm saying, not as a primary crop for nutrition. But we're going to have a huge opportunity to really experiment and figure out what are some things that work on our farms that aren't chemicals and aren't being sprayed, and like that is really exciting. And it's really exciting because it's, as farmers, I feel like we have allowed big agriculture to think for us in a lot of instances, and it's so easy to plant the new hybrid corn with all the traits and spray the chemical that takes care of all the weeds, and we're still going to have that, but this opens up an opportunity where farmers can really like be farmers again and experiment with what's working and see what's working in your region, in your farm, with your farming practices, and then get paid for it. And so I'm really excited about it, and that's what it excites me as doing something different. So
Yeah.
anyway,
It has a potential. I think it's one of the biggest farm policy shifts that we've seen probably since the Freedom to Farm Act in 1996, and it's interesting that it happened outside the Farm Bill. But again, I mean, this is the snap of a finger's creation of a new multi-billion-dollar market for ag producers to access. It just is coming in this really unconventional way and manner that is, I mean, we're not used to. Like, it's if I said that there was a new demand complex for a use of corn, there was a new use of corn that was going to add $5 to $10 billion back into the corn economy, we'd be talking about it nonstop. Well, that just happened. It's really hard for us to figure out exactly how, the details of how to access it, and we access it in different ways, not through increased production or from selling more corn to a new place, but by adding value to the corn that we're already doing, and milo, and canola, and soybeans, sunflowers to a smaller degree, anything that makes biofuel.
Jared, what was the IRA? Was that $2 billion?
Like for what?
Total dollars?
For equip and CSP and stuff, or what do you mean? So this is the exact same tax credits. They just got extended to where they haven't come into fruition yet.
Okay.
Now this guarantees that they come into fruition.
Okay. I guess what I'm thinking
was
through
somewhere around $8 billion in equip CSP RCPP over a 9-year baseline.
Gotcha. I mean, was it 2.5 years ago, year and a half? We were on here talking about climate smart commodity grants and what was going to happen as far as the landscape of farmers and ranchers and how they were going to be reshaped, right?
Yeah.
Because of all the cool things that were going to happen through the programs that they could sign up to.
Yep.
And some of it happened, but it probably didn't get to keep going.
Right.
And so my question is, when we thought that then, how does that compare to in terms of the size of what that was to what the size of dollars of what this is now? And
this is potentially more dollars annually than all those things combined were over a 9-year period.
Over a 9-year
just
period.
For corn.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, theoretically, the tax credits are infinite per se. It's all about how much biofuel you can produce.
Yeah.
Technically, they're infinite.
Well, they're infinite to the point of the total
U.S.
U.S. liability into income taxes for all individuals and companies.
And the amount of carbon that we can make via feedstocks to turn into alcohol or to fuel stocks, right?
It is limited to the photons delivered to Earth by the sun. Okay, let's say there's always a limit. That's the limit.
Well, the United States' percentage of them.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And U.S. and Mexico and Canada.
I forgot North America.
Yeah, North America. Yeah. No, not North America. Mexico, Canada, and U.S., not including Nicaragua, Honduras, El Salvador, Belize, Panama, Guatemala.
Well, they are close to
Cuba. Cuba? No way. We don't give it. No one cares about how much sunlight Cuba gets anymore.
Of course, Cuba could get the most because they have all that sugarcane production, and they are just sitting on a 45Z. You'll be instead of rafts of
not allowed.
Cuba, we'll have rafts of sugarcane.
No Cuban ethanol. None. It's garbage. Okay, so the last thing about was in this big beautiful bill that actually universally helps U.S. biofuel production, regardless of any individual CI scoring, all that kind of stuff, was the elimination of the indirect land use towards the CI score of U.S.-based feedstocks, right? So indirect land use is basically saying it was brought up over the last 20, 30 years to where they said, yeah, your corn ethanol was great, but then all of a sudden you added millions and millions of corn acres, mostly what was previous native grassland in central South Dakota, western North Dakota, central Nebraska. We lost a lot of grasslands in order to make all this corn. So they put basically a carbon tax on the feedstocks and indirect land use. And this was behind this crazy scenario where the California could get lower CI ethanol coming out of Brazil from sugarcane than they could from corn ethanol from the Midwest, right? It was just like a blanket carbon, kind of a detriment to the carbon score of any U.S. feedstocks that were grown as annual crops, which is all of them. That has gone away too, which if they looked at Brazilian corn ethanol, they'd have an indirect land use versus Amazon rainforest loss to increase crop production. But because all the sugarcane was produced in these, coastal areas that have been plantations for 400 years, producing, sugarcane, rum, indigo, tobacco, and all this kind of stuff, they were excluded from that. So that was that weird thing that allowed Brazilian sugarcane ethanol to be a valued product into California. Also, the used cooking oil stuff, which was a complete scam, which should be a whole nother podcast we could talk about, coming from mostly from China, has now been ineligible for these extra tax credits too because they're non-U.S. feedstocks. So was foreign tallow.
I just think of like used cooking oil. Like I just think of like the grease when I, do French fries or whatever. Think how many households of grease that takes to fill a hold of used cooking oil to go to. That's mind blowing if you think of it that way.
It's too expensive to do that way. You just have to import soybeans from the U.S. and then heat up the soybean oil to denature it so it looks like used cooking oil, and then ship it back to the U.S. for the tax credits. Yeah. It's way easier than getting people's little fry daddy dumpers dumped into a barrel and put on a ship. Okay. Okay, here's another fun fact. I saw this the other day, and it just still blows my mind.
It's a fun fact that you're going to start dumping your fry daddy in a barrel and selling to a biofuel producer to get a tax credit. Oh, okay.
We don't deep fry anything. Not even in tallow. Well, small in tallow. That's about it. So there is more biodiesel produced in the U.S. from beef tallow than from soybean oil. There is more biodiesel created from beef tallow than there is soybean oil.
I would believe that. I had no idea.
I saw that the other day. I hope I still have a text message somewhere. Took a screenshot of it. Shocked. Blew my mind.
Probably fake news.
Maybe. Yeah. Possibly fake news. Don't discount the fact that it was possibly fake news, but think about that. So then we can just replace all the soybean oil with tallow and then just make everybody healthier and still create the biodiesel.
We could create a bit for this podcast called Tallow Talk. And just have conversations about use and fun facts about tallow.
We do this podcast once every 2 weeks, but we could do a daily segment 6 days a week where it's just tallow talk.
Mm-hmm.
Like a tallow minute or
no, like an hour, tallow hour. Let's talk about beef tallow for an hour.
This is the driest podcast yet you guys have done. This one's going to be horrible. No one's going to listen to it.
This one?
Yes.
I'll wait till an hour 20 when they start talking about tallow and things get really exciting.
Yeah.
No one's going to listen to this one.
We'll keep track on which one was more successful, number one or number...
I know number one is way more exciting than this one.
I don't know. Depends on the audience.
Yep.
We'll see. We'll take a poll. Listeners, please let us know whether you prefer James Holtz in episode 1 or this most recent episode. Email us and let us know.
I prefer James Holtz in episode 1. There's no doubt about that.
Oh, you don't think you've grown personally in the last 3 years, or just our ability to extract content from you is lower?
Yeah, probably a little. Probably mostly I haven't grown in 3 years.
All righty. Anything else?
What a great conversation. Thanks for the.
I had a
thanks
question
for, the
for you guys.
James.
I was thinking about this because this is all about sausage, making sausage. What is your guys' favorite sausage or brats?
Wait, what is all about making sausage?
We're making, this was made, the Big Beautiful Bill, making the sausage was the Big Beautiful Bill.
Got it.
What
is our favorite sausage?
Is your favorite sausage or brat?
Or brat. Good. I'm glad that you included brats because I'm going with the brat. And I'm going with the Jackrabbit brat at SDSU Meat Lab. Oh. It's got blueberries and cheddar cheese.
Blueberries.
Dynamite.
Blueberries. Really?
I've said this for probably the last 4 weekends to my wife is when are we going to go to SDSU and get some jackrabbit brats? We haven't had those all summer, so that's what I'm going with.
Jared, putting
So
thought into sausages lately?
I prefer the sausage that we make at home when we do our butchering every year. We have a little seasoning packet that we get from the local locker and butcher some hogs and make it. That's good.
Nice. Well, I just recently had a lamb brat at the Greene County Fair. I had it right before you called me, Justin,
Wow.
and it was delicious. And so I was thinking of making the sausage of farm policy, and I was like, well, we better. You guys are old meatheads, so I thought I'd better ask you the question.
You have to brats with a natural casing that are not smoked. Like if a smoked brat is really a Polish sausage.
Yeah.
So I think they are probably two different classes.
Yeah. I'm not getting that.
Lots of
technical about
categories
it.
of sausage, but
Yeah.
breakfast sausage, sausage patties, sausage links. So many
You sound
different
like
ways
the
we
guy
can do
from
this.
Forrest Gump about shrimp.
Sausages.
Shrimp stew.
All
right.
right, James, thanks for
I got to
joining
go to
us.
work. See
Yeah,
you later.
Get to work. See ya.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, James.
Well, we hope you enjoyed another episode of the Roots and Ruminants podcast. Let us know what you thought of it. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all those social media things. And, if you ever have any questions, just give us a call. We've got a toll-free number here at 888-498-7333. Be glad to hear from you. Thank you.